Radha Radha everyone. Today we are going to watch a video about Prem Siddhant, the nature of God. Chapter 2, the nature of God, by Jagadguru Shri Kripalu Maharaj, and it's translated by Dr. Bhageshwari Devi Ji from Radha Madhav Society, United Kingdom. My humble pranams to my Divine Master's Divine Lotus Feet for giving the world the precious treasure of knowledge for all of us to understand and to practice in our daily life and to get rid of these material sufferings forever and to walk in the path of bhakti. Along with me, you all can bow down to my Divine Master's Divine Lotus Feet, and let's all pray together to follow His instructions and to practice in our daily life. Jai Shri Radhe. One who does not trust the words of his Guru cannot attain bliss even in a dream. One who loves the lotus feet of Guru, he is blessed in the world and beyond. Without the assistance from Guru, even the likes of Lord Shankar and Creator Brahma cannot cross the ocean of Maya. In a nutshell, experiential evidence, logic and philosophy, all these have to be used to grow devotion to Guru and God. That is the only way to rise above all pain and suffering. In the medical field, one drug cures a couple of diseases, and for curing other diseases, one needs to take other medicines. Those medicines might react with each other, causing more trouble for the patient. Unlike those medicines doing what the scriptures and saints have asked us to do, cures all types of pains, loneliness, sadness, depression, anxiety, loss of wealth, loss of health, loss of people, and other pain that can be there. So, engage your mind in devotion to treat all physical and mental diseases caused by ills. Panchakosh, Panchaklesh, Tritap, Trikarm, Tridosh, Tricharir of present and past. This will cure all the ills in the present, and such is the cure that no ills can ever return in the future. I would like to share Prem Siddhant, which I am going to read soon. The Preface. Every living being desires and seeks happiness. What is true happiness and how can it be attained? Unless we have the right answers to these most vital questions, we will never attain true happiness. There have been many authorities on Hinduism who have written various books based upon their experiences, which largely cannot arrive at any decisive conclusion, and in fact can become even more confused than he was before. The remarkability of Prem Siddhanta is that it reconciles all these contradictory philosophies with such simplicity, clarity, and perfection that the profoundest spiritual wisdom becomes accessible even to a layman. Besides quoting from the Vedas and other scriptures, Jagadguru Shri Kripalu Maharaj has used practical everyday examples in order to benefit people from all walks of life. The ease with which his directions are applicable to daily life is amazing. Knowledge of the divine science is limitless, yet in this little book, Sri Jagadguru Kripalu Maharaj has revealed the subtlest aspects of subjects such as aim of human life, the nature of God, the soul and the world, divine grace, the secret of dissension, etc., with such simplicity that even the most ordinary person can understand them. It easily dispels all doubts that could possibly arise in the minds of spiritual aspirants. His lucid exposition of the impersonal and personal aspects of God and the mystery of dissension is most unique. He has laid special emphasis upon the science of Karma Yoga because every individual soul has to pursue his goal of attaining divine bliss whilst performing all his worldly duties. In truth, I feel totally incompetent to give appropriate comments on the magnitude and profundity of Prem Siddhanta. This book is like a vast ocean filled in a little pot. There was a great demand for a translation of Prem Siddhanta in English. Translating any book on Hindu philosophy into a foreign language is a demanding task. This translation is totally an outcome of Sri Jagadguru Shri Kripalu Maharaj Ji's grace. I hope that it will serve as an unfailing source of inspiration, guidance and strength to spiritual aspirants all over the world. Dr. Bhageshwari Devi Ji from Radha Madhav Society, United Kingdom. Priceless treasure. Sri Krishna and bliss are synonymous words. Every person in the world desires only bliss. In other words, he is a servant of bliss and therefore unknowingly a servant of Sri Krishna. Sri Krishna divine bliss can be attained only through Bhakti Yoga, which is popularly known as Navadha Bhakti, the 9 forms of devotional practice. It is only by devotional practice that the heart becomes pure and then one can attain divine love of Sri Krishna. It is impossible to attain the divine qualities such as truth, non-violence, etc. without the purification of heart. Every devotional practice is related only to the mind. Any spiritual discipline practiced merely with the senses is not spiritual discipline at all. The consequences of love and hatred in the material world are the same. Therefore, true detachment can be attained only by being neutral. The perfection of spiritual life is to pursue Sri Krishna in all objects of the world, animate as well as inanimate. Although human body is invaluable, yet it is transient. Therefore, to procrastinate in devotional practice even for a moment is the greatest loss. To see faults in others is the surest proof that we possess faults ourselves. Spiritual practice is possible only under the guidance of a true saint or master. Prem Siddhant, the philosophy of divine love. Prem Siddhant is perhaps the most powerful book of spiritual literature on God realization ever written. This treasure of divine knowledge has been revealed by Jagadguru Shri Kripalu Maharaj, who has answered the most basic question for every human being. What is true happiness and how can it be attained? Through the authority of the Vedas and other Hindu scriptures, Jagadguru Shri Kripalu Maharaj has meticulously reconciled all seeming scriptural contradictions. In so doing, he has made accessible the most profound spiritual wisdom by using great simplicity, clarity, and perfection for the benefit of every soul. Though divine knowledge is limitless, this incomparable work has analyzed it beautifully with great precision, revealing the subtle aspect of important subjects such as the aim of human life, the nature of God's soul and the world, surrender and divine grace, secrets of dissension, the path to attain God, karma, bhakti yoga, practical devotion, and the nature of bad association, taking the help of his wonderful logic and innate ability to simplify the most complex concepts. Now any person can understand the deepest spiritual subjects with relative ease. This book will continue to inspire and guide sincere and aspiring devotees worldwide towards the ultimate goal of God realization, a must for every spiritual aspirant. So all don't forget to buy this book and don't forget to read, study, and don't forget to put in practice don't forget to put into practice, and don't forget to share with your friends and relatives as well. Yeah. The nature of God. One who does not know the Vedas cannot know God. Therefore, let us first find out what the Vedas have to say about God. A person who thinks that God can be understood does not understand Him, and who thinks that God cannot be understood has proper understanding. In other words, no one can understand God, but again, we have the Vedas emphasizing the need to know Him. If God is not understood in this human life, it will be a terrible loss. This precious human life is unattainable even by the celestial gods. The Vedas give us various reasons as to why God is incomprehensible. The first reason stated is beyond the senses are the sense objects, beyond the sense objects is the mind, beyond the mind is the intellect, beyond the intellect is the soul, beyond the soul is Maya, and beyond Maya is Brahman, God. Thus, God is totally beyond the reach of the senses, mind, and intellect, which are the only means the individual soul possesses. Therefore, he cannot be grasped and comprehended. The second reason is God is divine and the senses, mind, and intellect are material. The material senses cannot grasp a divine personality. The third reason is He is the supreme illuminator, and the senses, mind, and intellect are illumined by Him. The illumined cannot possibly illumine through illuminator. The illumined cannot possibly illuminate their illuminator. Hence, he is totally unknowable. The fourth reason is, it is through inspiration from God that the senses, mind and intellect perform their respective functions. Thus, the inspired senses, mind and intellect are incapable of grasping their inspirer, God. Besides this, God is an abode of various simultaneously existing contradictory qualities. He is smaller than the smallest atomic particle you could conceive, and he is also bigger than the biggest space you could imagine. It is essential for him to be smaller than the smallest. Otherwise, how could he permeate every particle of the universe and be omnipresent? Likewise, it is necessary for him to be bigger than the biggest, so that everything remains established within him and everything enters into him at the time of dissolution, Mahapralaya. It may even be possible to understand that he is simultaneously both, but the Vedas further state he is neither big or small. Now, how do we comprehend him? It is further stated he is beyond dharma and adharma, good and bad, and also beyond cause and effect. Again, it is stated, God is without sense organs, yet he grasps the objects of all senses. The same Upanishad further says, he has no feet, yet he runs. He has no hands, yet he holds. He has no eyes, yet he sees. He has no ears, yet he hears. He knows all that is to be known, but no one knows him. Now listen to a totally contradictory definition. He has innumerable heads, innumerable eyes, innumerable legs, and so on. If he did not have legs, we would presume him to be lame. But it is said that he runs, so how can we possibly consider him to be lame? The same is the case with the other sense organs. He walks, and at the same time he does not walk. He is farther than the farthest, and at the same time nearer than the nearest. He is both within all and outside all. Next, the Vedas state he is unborn, but he takes innumerable births again. He desired and performed austerities which resulted in creation. This implies that he is the creator of this universe, but it is also stated he is a non-doer, he does nothing. Describing the attributes of God, the Gita states, Vedyasa gives an extraordinary definition. Bhagavatam. God is the one who has taken the form of the world. He is the one for whom all actions in the world are performed. He is the one who protects the world. He is the one for whom it exists. He is the one from whom it has manifested, in whom it is established, and by whom it is maintained, and he is the one who is the Lord of Maya and of all living beings. The Ramayana too states the same. All these verses establish that God is totally imperceptible, unapproachable, and incomprehensible. Vyasa goes to the extent of saying that even the governors of the universe like Brahma and Shankara do not know him. The Vedas refer to Brahman or the Supreme Being as possessing three aspects. If these three aspects are known, then one can be freed from Maya. The first is Bhokta Brahman, the enjoyer all the individual souls. The second is Bhogya Brahman, the enjoyable Maya. And the third one is Preraka Brahman, the inspirer God. With regard to Bhokta Brahman, Vedavyasa says, the body is the chariot and the soul is the master of the chariot. The intellect is the charioteer, the mind is the reins, and the senses are the horses. Such an entity comprised of a soul, mind, intellect, and senses is referred to as the enjoyer or Bhokta Brahman. With regards to Bhogya Brahman, that which is enjoyable, the Vedas say, this entity is also eternal and it is referred to as Maya. It is tricolored owing to its constituent gunas or modes. Sattva, the mode of goodness, is symbolized as white, Rajasa. The mode of passion is symbolized as red, and Tamasa, the mode of ignorance, is symbolized as black. All the three entities, God, inspirer, Brahman, soul, enjoyer, Brahman, and Maya, enjoyable, Brahman, are beyond the comprehension of the intellect. Now, what we have to reflect upon is, when God is beyond our understanding, how can we expect to know Him? And without knowing Him, we cannot have faith. Without faith, we cannot attain Him. And without attaining Him, there is no question of attaining divine bliss, which is the goal of every living being. However, the Vedas declare there have been those who have known God. On the one hand, the scriptures declares God to be unknowable and imperceptible, and on the other hand, they state that He is unknowable, knowable, and perceptible. How will this problem be solved? We shall reflect upon this next. The grace of God. Although the Supreme Personality God cannot be grasped by the greatest senses, mind, and intellect, yet that unknowable and invisible God can be fully known and seen by that fortunate soul who is graced by Him with His divine power. O Arjuna, it is only by the grace of God that you can attain supreme peace and His eternally blissful divine abode. When Arjuna attained divine knowledge and the darkness of his ignorance was dispelled, he himself accepted this truth. By your grace alone I have attained divine knowledge and my ignorance has been dispelled forever. It is important to understand that true knowledge can never be overpowered by ignorance, just as light cannot be eclipsed by darkness. Now let us see what the Puranas say in this regard. Vedyasa states, no one can know God even if he endeavors to know Him for innumerable lifetimes. But when God imparts His grace to a soul, he can know Him and attain divine bliss for eternity. The Ramayana states the same. In relation to freedom from Maya, the Ramayana says that it is only by His grace that one can be freed from the bondage of Maya. With regard to freedom from delusion, the Ramayana declares that it is only by God's grace that one can be freed from delusion. Regarding mental afflictions, the Ramayana again says it is only through the grace of God that one can be eternally free from all mental afflictions. Even the association of genuine saints is not possible without the grace of God. The Ramayana declares it is only by the grace of God that one attains the association of a true saint. Thus, all the scriptures from the Vedas to the Ramayana have unanimously declare that we can neither be eternally freed from sorrow and suffering, nor can we attain divine bliss without God's grace. Now it appears that if everything depends on the grace of God, then we are freed of all responsibilities. When He graces us, then everything will automatically fall into place. What is the need to practice devotion or any other spiritual discipline? A majority of people use the excuse and say that nothing happens without God's will. Not a leaf can stir without His will. Whatever God wills happens. In fact, some people even go to the extent of blaming God for all their sinful and immoral actions and plead that they themselves are innocent. The scriptures declare that all living beings are like mechanical instruments operated by God. It is He who directs us and we act according to His directions. This principle is extremely dangerous if improperly understood. It can result in bringing about absolute ruin. But on the other hand, it can also lead to great spiritual progress if properly understood. So we need to seriously reflect upon it. Let us first consider whether God is all-knowing or ignorant. He, the Supreme Lord, is omniscient. Now, if God is omniscient and is our director, that is the doer of our every action, how can we possibly perform actions of ignorance? If God is the doer, why do we experience ourselves as doers and suffer the subsequent unhappiness arising out of those actions? If God is the doer of our every action, then He should suffer the consequences of these actions or pardon Himself. We should not be made to suffer the fruits of those actions. Even an ordinary human being would not be so unfair as to do something wrong himself and make another person suffer from it. It is possible that if one man eats, the hunger of another is satisfied, or that if one man overeats, another suffers the consequences of overeating. If God is the doer, then why has He laid down a code of conduct in the Vedas, a list of do's and don'ts? He should have said that the individual souls don't have to do anything and He will make them act according to His will. God is said to be impartial. Now, if this impartial God is accepted as the doer of everyone's actions, then why does He grant eternal bliss to some people such as Prahlada, Durva, Nanaka, Mirabai, and so on, while others are made to suffer as slaves in the bondage of desire, greed, and anger? How can He be so unjust? What was the need of cycle of 8.4 million species of life if it is stated that all this is a mere play of God and no one actually experiences happiness or sorrow? Then there would be no need of attaining God and divine knowledge. According to the above accusations, it is evident that if we accept God as the doer, He will prove to be a tyrannical being. Along with that, our indiscipline will also increase. We will become more and more negligent and our activities will become demonic. We are negligent enough to start with, and by accepting God as the doer, we will end up taking a course leading to our own downfall. There are those who accept that God is not to be blamed and he is not the doer, but it is our destiny which is to be blamed. God makes us to do whatever is destined for us, so we are also blameless. The quote verses to support this. Even great personalities like Brahma, Vishnu, and so on cannot change destiny. But such fatalists do not even know what fate is. The Hitopadesha explains. The consequences of actions performed with free will in past lives are called fate in the present life. In this way, whatever action is performed with free will in the present life will be called fate in the future. This obviously implies that we had freedom to act in the past. Now we were free to act in the past. How is it that the laws of spiritual government have changed in the present and we have lost that freedom of action? It is not absurd to hold such a view. The past was the present once upon a time, and the present will be the past in the future. Thus, if we are free to act in the past, then we are free to act even in the present. And if we claim that we are not free to act today, that is, we are bound by fate, then we must not have acted freely in the past either. Even a person with little common sense can understand this logic. In other words, using faith as an excuse for negligence in spiritual endeavor is even greater foolishness. Neither the scriptures nor worldly people advise you to do nothing on the grounds that fate will take care of everything. When it comes to worldly matters, we neither consider God the doer and renounce work, nor do we become lazy and leave everything to fate. We work diligently for the sake of wealth, for our children, etc. all the time, but use this philosophy as an excuse to make no effort to attain God. Some people blame time and become negligent, saying time will take care of everything. Some people say circumstances force a person to sin. They engage in various kinds of wicked deeds, using this as an excuse. All this is the result of one's own ignorance. In fact, God, time, and circumstances cannot be blamed for our actions. There are some atheistic nations which hold the view that circumstances cause one to sin, and some theistic nations state that God's will is behind all actions. But the astonishing thing is that there is no evidence in the history of either the atheistic nations or the theistic nations of people not being punished for their crimes, even though they may hold the view that circumstances are the cause or God's will is the cause. All this implies that people simply concoct philosophies or distort the truth just to justify their sinful ways. The fact is that every individual is personally responsible for his actions or inaction. Dosidasa says, one who blames God, time, and fate in order to act whimsically and sinfully is a murderer of his own soul. He does not attain happiness in this world, and he cannot even dream of attaining happiness in the next world. Thus, it is evident that to use God's grace as an excuse for spiritual inaction is a road leading to a total ruin. The truth is that God does not impart His grace whimsically. God's grace is based upon some condition, whatever it may be. Whosoever fulfills this condition attains His grace and becomes eternally blissful. Such a person is called a saint or a great soul Mahatma. The condition to attain God's grace will be discussed next. First, let's go to the Vedas. The Vedas state, surrender to the Supreme Lord, who is the creator of even Brahma and other celestial gods, and by whose grace the soul and intellect are illumined. This implies that it is only through surrender that we receive God's grace. The Gita says, Arjuna, surrender to the Supreme Lord alone with all your being. Then you will receive His grace, by which you will attain the divine abode and everlasting peace. The reason for this is Gita. This external divine power of mind, called Maya, consisting of the three modes, can only be crossed by one who surrenders to me. Vedyasa states in Bhagavatam, O Uddhava, abandon all actions governed by the three modes of Maya and surrender completely to me, because I am the soul of all the souls, the supreme soul. Only then can you become fearless and cross the ocean of Maya. The Ramayana states it is only through complete surrender that one can attain grace and be liberated from the bondage of Maya. All this scriptural evidence implies that we must surrender to God. God's grace is dependent upon surrender. All those souls who surrender to Him attain their supreme ultimate goal of divine bliss, whereas those who chose not have remained deprived of His grace and are evolving in the 8.4 million species of life, governed by time, destiny, their own natures, and the three modes of Maya, the gunas. Now a question likely to arise is that the act of doing something in order to attain God's grace is like a worldly business transaction of give and take. But to hold such a view is naive, because surrender actually means coming to a state of doing nothing. As long as a newborn baby does nothing, the mother does everything for it. When the child starts doing something, the mother lessens her responsibilities to the same extent. When the child begins to do everything, then the mother does nothing. This example fully explains what surrender is. As long as we suffer from the ego of being doers, we will remain bound by the fruits of our actions, because we will be considered the doers of our actions. The moment the feeling of doership ends, we will become non-doers, and God will personally take care of all our needs and protect whatever we have for eternity. Therefore, if by surrender, that is doing nothing, one attains freedom from Maya, freedom from its three modes, gunas, the three types of consequences of actions, trikarma, the three afflictions, tritapa, the five sheaths, panchakosha, etc., and simultaneously attains supreme bliss and everlasting peace. What great grace could that possibly be? If we had done something and received God's grace in return, an objection could have arisen that we had to do something to receive His grace. But since we attain everything just by doing nothing, that is complete surrender. This is only His costless mercy. What effort is required of us in letting go of everything? Understand this with an example. As long as a bird has a piece of food in its beak, it is noisily pursued by other birds and does not get a moment's peace. The moment the bird lets go of the piece of food, it attains peace immediately, because the other birds now leave it alone. However, even if one lets go of everything and surrenders to God, it cannot be the price for His grace. This is because what God gives is divine, unlimited and perfect, and what we let go of is material, limited and defective. Besides, of what use are material things to God? Let us look at an example from the Mahabharata. Draupadi, the wife of the Pandavas, was being insulted openly in court by being stripped of her clothing by Dushasana. Initially, Draupadi had faith that her mighty husbands would save her. When they did not respond to her entreaties, she turned to the elders in the assembly, Dronacharya, Kripacharya, Vidura, Bhishma, etc., who were authorities on religious principles. When she saw no help coming from them either, she tried to protect herself and clenched her sari between her teeth. Lord Krishna still did not come to help her. When Dushasana pulled her sari with a jerk, she lost hold of it and was totally helpless. Now she surrendered herself completely to Lord Krishna. In other words, she came to a state of doing nothing. It was only when she ceased to expect protection from elsewhere that she was protected by him. The Lord states in the Gita, "Abandon all kinds of righteous and unrighteous actions and surrender to me. Then I will forgive all your sins and uncountable past lifetimes." If I will forgive all your sins of uncountable past lifetimes, God, who acts as a judge, dispensing justice for all, becomes merciful for those who surrender to him. In the material world, if a criminal surrenders to the law, the court still punishes him for his past crimes. However, God is so merciful, the moment a soul surrenders to him completely, he forgives him, that is, he liberates him from the bondage of countless lifetimes of good and bad deeds, and also bestows the ultimate bliss upon the soul. In addition, he takes care of his needs and protects whatever he has for eternity. Is this not costless grace? Even an ignorant person will agree to this. Now this should put an end to the question whether God requires something as a price in return for his grace. If a cloth merchant supplies a dress free of cost for your daughter's wedding, he is being really kind. If a washerman were to clean your clothes and not charge you for it, we would say that he has done you a favor, even though the clothes could become dirty again. Whereas when God purifies your mind, it never becomes impure again. When a woman marries, she automatically becomes an equal owner of her husband's property. Similarly, when you surrender to God, you automatically acquire his unlimited knowledge, bliss, and love. Now let us find out what we have to surrender to God. We possess body, senses, mind, and intellect. The scriptures say the mind alone is the cause of bondage and liberation. Vedyasa declares it means that the factual cause for bondage and liberation is the mind. So we must surrender the mind to God. By surrendering it, all else will automatically be surrendered. Usually people worship God physically but keep their minds attached to the world. Such external worship only leads to worldly results. The unalterable law is that one's attainment will either be spiritual or material according to the attachment of one's mind and not according to one's physical actions. Thus, if we physically engage in worldly activities but keep the mind attached to God, then we will not have to bear the fruits of our physical actions. Instead, we will only receive spiritual results because of the attachment of our mind to Him. The surrender of the mind is true surrender. Just as it is impossible to run with the tied feet or speak with a closed mouth, it is impossible to practice devotion to God with the mind attached elsewhere. In reality, it is only the attachment of the mind which is referred to as devotion in the spiritual realm, but this same attachment is directed to the material world is referred to as infatuation. It is impossible to laugh loudly and puff up one's cheeks at the same time. In the same way, it is impossible for the mind to be attached to God and the material world simultaneously. The mind can be attached to only one area at one time. There is a story told of some Brahmins of Madura who, in a state of intoxication, got into a boat that was chained to the shore. After a night of vigorous rowing, they found that they had not moved forward an inch. Exactly like that, devotion to God, practiced even for innumerable lifetimes, with the mind chained by attachment to wealth, children, spouse, and so on, will result merely in attainment of the material world, because devotion to God did not factually take place. There was only some external act of prayer, worship, or ritual. The result one reaps depends on the attachment of the mind alone. The gopis express their devotional state to Uddhava very beautifully in the following lines. O Uddhava, Oh Uddhava, we have only one mind, and that is with Shyam Sundara. If we had many minds, then we could have used each one in different areas and managed both devotion to God and to the world. But God is aware of the fact that if each individual were to be given two minds, then no one would have been able to fulfill the condition of exclusive surrender to Him. To conclude, surrender of the mind alone is true surrender to God, no matter what the physical actions may be. Now, we need to analyze the difficulties in bringing the mind to the state of complete surrender. The only difficulty is that the mind has been attached to the material world since time immemorial, and this attachment has become very firm. Had the mind been neither attached to the world nor to God, then surrender would have been very easy. Therefore, we need to understand the factual nature of the world so that we can become detached from it. It is only then that surrender to God will be possible. If you would like to read more, you can buy Prem Siddhant book. Okay? We'll see you all soon with another video. Stay tuned. Jai Jai Shri Radhe.